I still remember the look on my father's face when he told me I wasn't in the will. His eyes, once warm like amber honey, had hardened into something unrecognizable. "You're not part of this family anymore," he said, his voice devoid of the love I'd spent 53 years believing was unconditional. The living room suddenly felt smaller, the family portraits on the mahogany walls watching me with accusatory eyes. My sister smirked from the leather armchair my mother used to sit in before cancer took her. The maid, Elena, polishing the silver in the corner, pretended not to hear, but I saw her hands trembling. 27 years she'd been with us, watching the slow poison of greed infect my family. My father had called me worthless, a burden, all because I'd questioned the new wife who'd appeared suspiciously soon after my mother's funeral. The woman half his age who now controlled everything, including him. That night, as I drove away from the estate I'd grown up in, tears blurring the familiar winding driveway lined with oak trees my grandfather had planted, I made a decision. If they wanted to erase me, to throw me away like I was nothing, I would show them what nothing truly felt like. The inheritance, the family name, the legacy. They thought these things belonged to them. But I knew secrets about my father that could change everything. Secrets even Elena didn't know she possessed. The first red flag appeared 3 days after my mother's funeral. I was sorting through her belongings in the master bedroom, the silk scarves still holding traces of her perfume, the novels with dog-eared pages marking where her journey through them had ended prematurely. My father had disappeared into his study as he always did, drowning his grief in whiskey and paperwork. Elena knocked softly before entering with a tray of tea. "Your father asked me to help you finish quickly," she said, her Colombian accent stronger when she was uncomfortable. "He says the room needs to be cleared by tomorrow." I looked up, a handful of my mother's jewelry still warm in my palm. "Tomorrow? That's impossible. I've barely started." Elena lowered her eyes. "He says the decorator is coming, for changes." The teacup clattered against the saucer as my hand began to shake. "Decorator? My mother's been dead for 3 days." Elena nodded almost imperceptibly, then whispered, "There is a woman with him in the study. Young, blonde, 3rd time this week." That night, I confronted him. The study door was unlocked, unusual for my father who guarded his privacy like a dragon hoarding gold. He was on the phone, laughing, a sound I hadn't heard since before my mother's diagnosis. He didn't notice me at first. Giving me time to see the framed photo of my mother that normally sat on his desk was now face down in the wastebasket. "Dad?" My voice cracked. He turned, irritation flashing across his face as he hurriedly ended the call. "What are you doing in here? You know better than to enter without knocking." "Who was that on the phone?" "Elena said there's been a woman visiting." His face darkened like a thundercloud. "Elena should mind her business if she wants to keep her job. And you should mind yours. Mom's been gone for 3 days, and you're already—" The crystal tumbler of whiskey slammed down on the mahogany desk. "Your mother would want me to be happy. She made me promise not to mourn forever. She meant eventually, not immediately. And clearing out her room for a decorator? That's my decision. This is my house, bought with my money. Everything here belongs to me, including your mother's things." I stepped back as if slapped. She was my mother, and my wife. I decide what happens now. He stood, towering over the desk. "And I've decided it's time for changes." 2 weeks later, she moved in. Veronica, 28 years old to my father's 71, with a smile that never reached her eyes. My sister Sarah embraced the change, suddenly visiting more often than she had during our mother's entire illness. I watched them from the garden one afternoon, laughing on the terrace while Elena served them mimosas. My sister hanging on Veronica's every word about fashion and travel, as if this stranger had replaced our mother in her heart as easily as she had in our father's bed. That evening, Elena found me alone in the kitchen, tears streaming down my face as I clutched my mother's recipe book. "They act like she never existed," I whispered. Elena's weathered hand covered mine. "Your mother was a good woman. She treated me with respect when others in this house did not." I looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" Elena hesitated, then spoke quietly. "Your mother knew things about this family, things she protected you from knowing. Before she could continue, the kitchen door swung open. My father and Veronica stood there, his arm possessively around her waist. "Elena, we'll need dinner for 4 tonight." "Sarah's staying," he announced. Then his eyes narrowed as he noticed my tear-streaked face. "Still moping around? It's been weeks. Veronica thinks it's becoming uncomfortable having you here like this." "Veronica thinks?" I echoed in disbelief. "Yes," the blonde interjected smoothly. "It's unhealthy to dwell in grief. Perhaps you should consider moving back to your own home soon." "This is my home," I said, my voice strengthening. "It has been for 53 years. My father's jaw tightened. "This is my home. You're merely a guest now." The words struck like physical blows. I looked to Elena, whose eyes were downcast, but whose hands were clenched in silent rage. "Your mother would be disappointed in you," he added, twisting the knife deeper. Something inside me snapped. "No, she would be disgusted by you. By how quickly you've forgotten her, replaced her, erased her." "That's enough," he roared, advancing toward me until I was backed against the counter. "You don't get to judge me. I gave you everything. Your ungrateful attitude is why you've always been a disappointment. Even your mother knew that." I gasped, feeling as though all oxygen had been sucked from the room. "That's a lie." His smile was cruel. "Is it? Ask yourself why she left specific instructions about the will." He turned to leave, pulling Veronica with him, but paused at the doorway. "Elena, when you're done comforting the unwanted daughter, we'll be expecting that dinner promptly at 7. The door swung shut behind them, leaving only the sound of Elena's soft prayer in Spanish and my shattered breathing. Let me know in the comments. Which country or city are you watching this from? The following months became a slow, methodical erasure of my existence from the family narrative. Family photos where I stood beside my mother were replaced with new portraits of my father, Veronica, and Sarah. My childhood bedroom was renovated into Veronica's personal yoga studio without warning. My belongings packed into cardboard boxes and relegated to the garage. Each visit became more painful than the last, yet I couldn't stay away. This house contained the last echoes of my mother, and abandoning it felt like abandoning her memory to people who wanted it buried. I found unexpected solace in Elena's company. We began sharing afternoon tea in the kitchen when my father and Veronica were out, whispering like conspirators in our own home. "Your mother worried about this," Elena confided one rainy afternoon, her voice barely audible over the drumming of water on the window panes. "In her final weeks, she would ask me to sit with her while your father was away. She knew something wasn't right." "What do you mean?" I clutched my teacup tighter, the warmth a small comfort. Elena hesitated, glancing toward the door. "She found something in his study, papers. She was too weak to understand them fully, but she made copies." Elena's eyes met mine. "She gave them to me for safekeeping, made me promise to give them to you if anything strange happened after she was gone." My heart pounded against my ribs. "What papers? Where are they?" "Not here," Elena whispered urgently as the sound of a car pulling into the driveway interrupted us. "My nephew's apartment in the city. It's not safe to talk now." The kitchen door swung open, and Veronica appeared, designer shopping bags hanging from her arms like trophies. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously at our hushed conversation. "Elena, my father-in-law would like his afternoon cocktail in the study." Her emphasis on father-in-law was deliberate, a dagger aimed at my heart. I hadn't been told of any wedding. "When did you get married?" I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Veronica's smile was a predator's. "Last week. Small ceremony at the courthouse. Sarah was our witness. We didn't want to bother you with it, knowing how emotional you've been lately." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You married my father without telling me? He's a grown man who makes his own decisions." She placed her shopping bags on the counter. "Speaking of decisions, he'd like to speak with you in the study. Something about the will and your expectations." The walk to my father's study felt like a march to an execution. Family photographs I didn't recognize lined the hallway, new memories being manufactured without me. When I entered, my father wasn't alone. A man in an expensive suit sat across from him, legal documents spread between them. Sarah perched on the arm of my father's chair, a united front against me. "Ah, here she is," my father said without warmth. Michael, this is my older daughter, the one I mentioned. The lawyer nodded curtly, not bothering to introduce himself properly. We're finalizing some changes to my will and estate planning, my father continued, not inviting me to sit. In light of my marriage and recent events, I'm making adjustments. Sarah smirked, unable to contain her satisfaction. What recent events? I asked, remaining standing though my legs threatened to buckle. Your behavior has been increasingly erratic. The scenes you've created, your jealousy toward Veronica, your inability to move forward. He sighed dramatically, as if burdened by my very existence. Sarah and Veronica have expressed concerns about your stability, and I find myself agreeing. That's ridiculous, I protested. I've done nothing but try to preserve Mom's memory while you've been systematically erasing it. This is exactly what we mean, Sarah interjected smoothly. These outbursts, these accusations, it's concerning. The lawyer cleared his throat. Perhaps I should explain the changes directly. Mr. Harrison has decided to remove you as a beneficiary from his will and trust. The estate will be divided between his wife Veronica and your sister Sarah upon his passing. The room tilted beneath my feet. You're disinheriting me completely? Consider it a consequence of your actions, my father replied coldly. You've made it clear you don't support my happiness or my choices. This isn't about your happiness. This is about how quickly you've forgotten Mom. See what I mean, Michael? My father addressed the lawyer without looking at me. Irrational, emotional outbursts, possibly unstable. Make note of that in case she contests the will later. The lawyer nodded, jotting something in his legal pad. You can't do this, I whispered, though I knew he could. Mom would never have wanted. Your mother is dead. He cut me off harshly. And you didn't know her as well as you think. There are things about her, about this family, that you've been sheltered from your entire life. Sarah stood, approaching me with false sympathy. Maybe it's time you started your own life, away from here. You're not part of this family anymore. Not the way it's evolving. I backed toward the door, feeling physically ill. You've both lost your minds. Or your souls. As I turned to leave, my father called after me. One more thing. I've decided to let Elena go. Veronica finds her unsuitable for our household. She'll be leaving at the end of the month. I froze, sudden terror gripping me. Elena was my last connection to my mother, and now they were severing that too. But more urgently, the papers my mother had entrusted to her. If Elena left before I could retrieve them, you can't fire Elena. She's been with this family for nearly 30 years. I can, and I have, my father replied dismissively. Unless you'd like to hire her yourself? Though I doubt a high school art teacher's salary would cover a full-time maid. The barb about my modest career choice, always a disappointment to him compared to Sarah's corporate law degree, barely registered through my panic. Later that night, I slipped into the servants' quarters behind the kitchen for the first time in my life. Elena's room was small but meticulously kept, with a small altar bearing a cross and a picture of her family. She was packing a small suitcase when I entered. He's firing you because of me, I said, the guilt overwhelming. Elena shook her head. No, Senora. He fires me because I know too much, just like your mother. She closed the bedroom door and lowered her voice. Tomorrow, go to this address. She pressed a scrap of paper into my palm. My nephew Carlos works late, but I will call him. He has what your mother wanted you to have. What will you do? I asked, suddenly aware of how little I knew about Elena's life outside our home, despite her decades of service. A small, determined smile lifted her features. I have saved enough. My sister in Bogota has a small restaurant. Maybe now I will finally go home. The next day, I called in sick to the high school where I taught and drove to the address Elena had given me, an apartment building in a modest neighborhood downtown. Carlos, a young man with Elena's same kind eyes, let me in without questions. He retrieved a sealed envelope from behind a loose baseboard in his bedroom closet. My aunt said this was important, he said simply. That bad people might look for it. Inside the envelope were bank statements, offshore account numbers, and corporate documents. At first, the technical jargon meant little to me, but as I pieced it together at Carlos's kitchen table, a horrifying picture emerged. My father had been systematically embezzling from his own company for years, hiding millions in offshore accounts. But worse, my mother's signature appeared on several documents, implicating her in the scheme, though the dates corresponded to times I knew she had been hospitalized for cancer treatments. He had forged her signature, potentially making her posthumously liable for his crimes. But the most damning document was a letter, written in my mother's shaky hand during her final days. My dearest daughter, if you're reading this, then my suspicions were correct. Your father is not the man we believed him to be. The evidence I've gathered suggests he's been stealing from the company for years. But I fear something worse. He's been impatient for my death. The symptoms that puzzled my doctors. I believe he may be poisoning me to accelerate his timeline. Elena has noticed him adding something to my tea when he thinks no one is watching. I'm too weak to fight now, but you must protect yourself. He will come for you next if you stand in his way. All my love, Mom. My hands trembled so violently that Carlos gently took the letter from me before I could drop it. My aunt, he said quietly. She suspected, but had no proof. This is why she stayed so long. To watch over your mother. To try to protect her. I thought back to all those afternoon teas my mother and Elena had shared. How Elena had insisted on preparing my mother's drinks herself toward the end. She had been trying to shield my mother from my father. And now I understood why my father wanted Elena gone. She was the only other witness. As I left Carlos's apartment, clutching copies of everything while he secured the originals in a safe place, my phone rang. It was Sarah, her voice tight with controlled anger. Where are you? Father's collapsed. We're at Memorial Hospital. The doctors are saying... Her voice broke, genuine fear slipping through her calculated facade. They're saying it might be poisoning. The hospital corridor stretched before me like the threshold to another life. I clutched my handbag containing the damning documents against my chest, my heart pounding with each step toward the private room where my father lay. Outside his door, Veronica paced in Louboutin that clicked against the polished floor like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. Sarah sat rigidly in a waiting chair, her lawyer's composure cracking around the edges. What happened? I asked, keeping my voice neutral despite the hurricane of emotions within me. Sarah looked up, her mascara smudged for the first time in her perfect adult life. They think someone poisoned him. Thallium, they suspect. It's been happening gradually, building up in his system. My mother's letter burned in my memory. Had my father fallen victim to the same fate he'd orchestrated for her? Where were you? Veronica demanded, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. We've been calling for hours. I had errands to run, I replied vaguely, watching her reaction carefully. How serious is it? They've moved him to intensive care, Sarah explained. They're running more tests, but the doctor said... Her voice faltered. If they don't find the source soon, his organs could start failing. A doctor emerged from my father's room, clipboard in hand. His grave expression suggested news no one wanted to hear. Family of Harrison? He inquired, looking between us. I'm his wife. Veronica stepped forward immediately, positioning herself as the primary decision-maker. These are his daughters. The doctor nodded. Mr. Harrison's condition is critical but stable for now. We've confirmed thallium poisoning, which is extremely rare and nearly always deliberate. The police have been notified and will want to speak with everyone who had access to his food and drink. Poisoned? Veronica's hand flew to her throat in what seemed like rehearsed shock. But who would do such a thing? The doctor's gaze shifted uncomfortably between us. That's for the authorities to determine. For now, we're focused on treatment. We're administering Prussian blue to help bind the thallium and remove it from his system. But given the apparent prolonged exposure, recovery will be challenging. Can we see him? Sarah asked, already standing. Briefly. He's conscious but weak. Please don't overwhelm him. Veronica immediately pushed past the doctor toward the door. Sarah followed, then paused when she realized I wasn't moving. Aren't you coming? She asked, a flicker of genuine puzzlement crossing her face. I'll wait, I replied. Give you two some time with him first. Something about my calm demeanor must have unsettled her, but she didn't press the issue. Once they disappeared inside, I approached the doctor who was updating my father's chart. Doctor, I said quietly, I have reason to believe my mother died of similar poisoning last year. Her symptoms were attributed to cancer complications, but given this development, the doctor's eyes widened. That's a serious allegation. Have you shared this with the police? Not yet, but I will. I took a deep breath. My mother suspected my father was poisoning her. I have a letter she wrote before she died. The doctor looked toward my father's room, then back to me. The detectives are on their way. You should tell them everything. When the police arrived 30 minutes later, I was ready. I provided copies of my mother's letter and the financial documents showing my father's embezzlement, a potential motive for silencing her. The detectives listened impassively, occasionally exchanging glances as the story unfolded. We'd like permission to exhume your mother's body for toxicology, the lead detective finally said. Of course, I agreed immediately. Whatever it takes to find the truth. And where is this maid, Elena, now? We'll need her statement. She was recently fired. I can provide her contact information. As I spoke with the detectives in a private consultation room, raised voices echoed from the direction of my father's room. We all turned to see Veronica storming out, her face contorted with fury. "This is ridiculous!" she was shouting over her shoulder. "I've been nothing but devoted." Sarah emerged behind her, looking stricken. "The police will sort it out, Veronica. If you're innocent, you have nothing to fear." I excused myself from the detectives and approached my sister. "What's happening?" Sarah's composure had completely crumbled. Dad regained consciousness enough to speak. He told the nurse. She swallowed hard. He said not to let Veronica near his food or medication. He thinks she's been poisoning him. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who likely murdered our mother now feared the same fate at the hands of his new bride. "They found thallium in her purse," Sarah continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "A small vial. She claims it's a homeopathic remedy, but over the next 48 hours, my father's condition stabilized enough for the police to formally interview him." I waited in the hospital cafeteria, nursing a cold coffee as the wheels of justice began their slow turn. Veronica had been taken in for questioning, but released pending further investigation. She'd returned briefly to the house to collect some belongings, then disappeared, likely to one of the hidden bank accounts she'd convinced my father to add her name to. Sarah joined me in the cafeteria, looking like she'd aged years and days. "They've taken her passport," she said without preamble. "Veronica's. Flight risk. Do they have enough evidence?" I asked. Sarah shrugged helplessly. "The thallium in her purse is damning, but her lawyer is claiming it was planted. They're testing everything in the house now." She stared into her untouched tea. "The police asked about Mom's death. Dad told them it was natural causes. And you? What do you think now?" Her eyes met mine, swimming with unshed tears. "I don't know what to believe anymore. Everything's falling apart. They're exhuming Mom's body," I said gently. "We'll know soon." Sarah blanched. How could we have been so blind? I wanted to believe he was just moving on, finding happiness after losing her. I never thought he made us believe what he wanted us to believe. Both of us. A detective approached our table, his expression professionally neutral. "Ms. Harrison, your father is asking for you." "Which one?" Sarah and I asked in unison. "Both, actually." My father looked diminished against the hospital pillows, his skin sallow and eyes sunken. The powerful man who had dominated our lives was reduced to a frail shell. Medical equipment surrounded him like mechanical sentinels, monitoring the damage the poison had wrought on his body. "My girls," he whispered when we entered, attempting to smile. "Come closer." We approached cautiously, standing on opposite sides of his bed. Up close, I could see the yellow tinge to his eyes. His liver was failing. "The police have been asking difficult questions," he said, his voice raspy. "About your mother. About money. Did you poison Mom?" I asked directly, beyond caring about social niceties. Sarah gasped at my bluntness, but my father held my gaze. "No," he said firmly. "I loved your mother. I would never hurt her." "Then why did she think you were poisoning her? Why did she hide evidence against you?" His eyebrows drew together in confusion that seemed genuine. "What evidence?" "The offshore accounts, the embezzlement, her forged signatures." Recognition dawned in his eyes, followed by something that looked remarkably like relief. Ah, she found those. He turned his head slightly toward Sarah. Your sister doesn't have the full picture. Then enlighten me, I challenged. My father closed his eyes briefly, gathering strength. The accounts weren't mine. They were your mother's. Sarah made a small, disbelieving sound. Your mother came from money. Old money her family lost during her childhood. She grew up poor but entitled, always believing wealth was her birthright. When we married and my business succeeded, she developed expensive tastes. Mom was the embezzler? I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. At first, it was small amounts. Shopping sprees she hid from me, then larger withdrawals for investments that never materialized. By the time I discovered what she was doing, she'd hidden millions. His breathing grew labored. I covered for her, created a paper trail that would protect her if anyone discovered the discrepancies. That's why her signature is on those documents. Not forged, but real. I don't believe you, I said flatly. The evidence is in the study safe. Combination is your birthday, he replied, eyes still closed. Her original transfers, her private accounts before I consolidated everything offshore. She was troubled. More than you knew. And Elena? I pressed. Why fire her after nearly 30 years? At this, my father's eyes opened, focusing on me with surprising clarity. Because she helped your mother hide her condition from me until it was too late to treat effectively. Your mother refused conventional treatment for her cancer until the final stages, preferring homeopathic remedies Elena sourced from Colombia. By the time I learned how serious it was, his voice broke. I could have saved her with proper medical care. Elena knew that and kept her secret anyway. My head spun with competing narratives. My mother's letter painted my father as a murderer. My father claimed my mother was an embezzler who refused life-saving treatment. Both versions contradicted everything I thought I knew about my parents. And Veronica? Sarah asked quietly. Did she poison you? A bitter laugh escaped him. Veronica. I was a fool. He reached weakly for a cup of water, which Sarah helped him drink. She found your mother's financial records, threatened to expose everything unless I married her and changed my will. So you cut me out to protect Mom's reputation? I asked, not sure whether to laugh or scream at the absurdity. No, he admitted, looking away. That was spite. You remind me so much of your mother, the same righteous anger, the same judgment in your eyes. When you accused me of erasing her memory, it was like she was haunting me through you. The detective knocked gently on the doorframe. Excuse me. We need to ask a few more questions if you're feeling up to it, Mr. Harrison. My father nodded weakly, then looked between Sarah and me. Whatever you believe about me, about your mother, protect each other now. The vultures are circling. In the hallway, Sarah gripped my arm. What do we do? We find the truth, I replied. All of it. That night, we returned to the family home together. The police had finished their initial search, leaving behind fingerprint dust on surfaces and evidence tags on certain items. The house felt like a crime scene because it was one. We headed straight for our father's study. As promised, the safe opened with my birthday combination. Inside, we found exactly what he'd described. Financial records showing transfers initiated by our mother years before her illness. Private bank statements in her maiden name. Receipts for alternative cancer treatments from a clinic in Mexico. This can't be real, Sarah murmured, sorting through the papers. She was perfect. No one is perfect, I replied, thinking of the complicated woman who might have been hiding darkness behind her warm smile. Maybe we never really knew either of them. Sarah looked up suddenly. What about the thallium they found in Veronica's purse? If Dad isn't lying, then who poisoned him? I finished her thought. The answer came 3 days later, after our mother's body was exhumed and tested. The detective called us both to the station, his expression grave as we sat in a sterile interview room. Your mother's remains showed high levels of thallium, he confirmed. But there's more. We've been tracking purchases of the compound, which is tightly controlled. Only one person connected to your family has obtained it recently. He slid a photograph across the table. Elena's nephew, Carlos, exiting a chemical supply warehouse 6 months earlier. We've taken him into custody. the detective continued. He's admitted to providing the poison to his aunt, who apparently had been administering it to your father for months. And before that, to your mother. I felt the blood drain from my face. Elena poisoned them both? But why? The detective consulted his notes. According to Carlos, his aunt believed your father had destroyed her family back in Colombia. Something about reporting her brother to authorities for drug trafficking, resulting in his execution. She came to work for your family under false pretenses, planning revenge for decades. 27 years, I whispered, remembering how long Elena had been with us. She waited 27 years. Revenge is patient, the detective said simply. And apparently, so is justice. The funeral was smaller than I expected for a man who had built a business empire. Former colleagues and business partners stood in uncomfortable clusters beneath the cemetery's oak trees, their conversations hushed and uneasy. My father had survived the poisoning only to succumb to the organ damage it had caused 3 weeks later. His final days had been spent giving depositions to the police and making what amends he could to Sarah and me. Veronica didn't attend. She'd been charged as an accessory after police discovered she'd known about Elena's actions for months, but kept silent, hoping to benefit from my father's eventual death. In exchange for her testimony against Elena, she'd received a plea deal that still included prison time, but far less than she deserved. Elena remained in custody, denied bail as both a flight risk and danger to others. When confronted with the evidence, she had confessed with an eerie serenity, describing how she had slowly poisoned my mother first to punish my father, to make him watch someone he loved suffer as she had watched her brother suffer. Then, when that didn't break him as she'd hoped, she began poisoning him directly. She showed no remorse. The detective had told us during our final briefing. She said the only thing she regretted was being caught before she could watch your father lose everything. Now, as the minister spoke generic words over my father's casket, I found myself caught between grief for the father I thought I'd known and anger at the man he'd actually been. The offshore accounts had proven real. My mother had indeed been siphoning money, though whether with my father's knowledge or not remained unclear. Their marriage, which I'd idealized even after his betrayal with Veronica, had been built on mutual deception. Sarah stood beside me, her hand occasionally brushing mine in silent support. We'd forged an uneasy alliance in the wake of revelations that had stripped away our family mythology. Neither of us knew what to believe anymore, but we'd agreed on one thing. Whatever happened next, we would face it together. After the graveside service, we returned to the family home. Now technically our home, as my father's revised will had left everything divided equally between us. The embezzled funds remained frozen pending investigation, but the house and legitimate assets were ours to sort through. The reading of the will had been a somber affair at the lawyer's office the previous day, with one unexpected addition that had left us both speechless. "There's a letter," the lawyer said, retrieving a sealed envelope from his desk, "to be read only after the funeral." Now, seated in the living room where this nightmare had begun months ago with my father's cruel pronouncement that I was cut from the will, we stared at the unopened letter between us on the coffee table. "You do it," Sarah said, her voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "I can't bear any more surprises." With trembling fingers, I broke the seal and unfolded the single page. "My daughters," I read aloud, "by the time you read this, I will be gone, and you will know uncomfortable truths about our family that I never wanted exposed. The accounts, the deception, the poisoning, all of it born from secrets that should have died with me. But there is one final truth you deserve to know." I paused, meeting Sarah's anxious gaze before continuing. "Elena was not wrong about everything. 27 years ago, I did business with a Colombian cartel. It was the investment that saved my failing company and launched everything we built afterward. When authorities began investigating, I gave them Elena's brother to protect myself. I told myself it was justifiable. He was a criminal, after all. But I've carried that debt with me every day since. When Elena applied for a position in our household, I recognized her name immediately. I hired her out of guilt, thinking I could somehow make amends by providing for another member of the family I'd helped destroy. I never imagined she would wait decades for her revenge. Sarah pressed her hand to her mouth, stifling a sound between a gasp and a sob. Our family fortune was built on blood money. I continued reading, my voice growing hoarse. Your mother discovered this during my business dealings in Mexico for her treatments. The embezzlement began as her attempt to launder the money into legitimate investments, to cleanse our legacy before either of you inherited it. When she became too ill to continue, I took over the transfers, trying to finish what she started. Everything got twisted in those final months. Her paranoia from the poisoning, my guilt, Elena's machinations setting us against each other. The letter's final paragraph was written in shakier handwriting, clearly added in his hospital bed. I've instructed Michael to revise the will one last time. The house and legitimate business holdings are yours to share equally, but the largest portion of our wealth, the tainted money, should go to someone who truly deserves it, who served our family faithfully while we destroyed hers. By the time you read this, arrangements will have been made to transfer these funds to Maria Gutierrez, Elena's younger sister in Bogota, the one person in this tragedy who remains innocent. Let her build something good from our family's shame. It's the only justice I can offer now. I loved you both, imperfectly but completely. Forgive what you can. Forget the rest. The paper slipped from my fingers to the floor. Sarah stared at me, her face white with shock. He gave everything to Elena's sister? She whispered. The money from the offshore accounts? Apparently so, I replied, feeling strangely calm. Nearly $40 million, according to the financial records. But that's almost everything. We're left with just the house and the company shares, which are worth plenty, I reminded her. More than enough for both of us to live comfortably. Sarah stood abruptly, pacing the room. This is insane. Elena tried to murder both our parents and her family gets rewarded for it? We could contest this. Find a way to what? I interrupted. Keep money that was never legitimately ours? That was earned through drug trafficking and someone's death? I shook my head. Let it go, Sarah. We're better off without it. Easy for you to say, she snapped. You've always been content with your teacher's salary and moral superiority. Some of us want more from life. Like Veronica wanted more? The words struck like a slap. Sarah flinched, then slowly sank back onto the sofa. I'm sorry. I don't mean that. It's just, everything I thought I knew about our family has turned out to be a lie. Mom, Dad, our wealth, our perfect life. It was all built on corruption and revenge. Not everything, I said gently, moving to sit beside her. We're still here, still sisters. She leaned against my shoulder, something she hadn't done since we were children. What do we do now? 6 months later, I stood in the grand entrance hall of what had once been our family home, watching as the final pieces of furniture were carried out by the charity workers. Sarah and I had decided to sell the house, unable to live with the ghosts it contained. The proceeds would establish a foundation focused on addiction treatment and victim support, our attempt to build something meaningful from the ruins of our family legacy. Sarah had surprised everyone, including herself, by leaving her corporate law practice to run the foundation full-time. I'm tired of serving money, she'd told me. I want to serve something that matters. I'd taken a sabbatical from teaching to travel to Colombia, not to confront Maria Gutierrez about her sister's crimes or contest the inheritance, but to understand the human cost of my father's actions that had set this tragedy in motion decades earlier. Maria had welcomed me with wary hospitality, sharing stories of her brother, of Elena's devotion to avenging him, of a family shattered by violence and poverty after his execution. I never wanted their money, Maria had confessed over coffee in her modest apartment. When the lawyer came, I tried to refuse it. But then I thought, perhaps this is how the circle of pain finally ends. She had used the money to establish a community center in her brother's name, offering education and opportunities to young people vulnerable to cartel recruitment. In her own way, she was attempting to break the cycle that had consumed both our families. Now, as I signed the final paperwork transferring ownership of our family home to its new owners, I felt an unexpected lightness. The weight of false legacies and hidden crimes no longer bowed my shoulders. The house keys felt small and insignificant in my palm as I placed them in the realtor's outstretched hand. Outside, Sarah waited in her car, Maps spread across the passenger seat for our cross-country road trip, something we'd talked about doing since childhood, but never made time for amid competitive career building and family obligations. "Ready?" she asked as I slid into the seat beside her. "Almost," I replied, taking one last look at the house through the windshield. The grand facade that had once represented everything I thought our family stood for now seemed like an elaborate stage set. Impressive, but hollow. "You know," Sarah said, following my gaze, "Elena once told me something when I was a teenager that I never understood until now. She said, 'Big houses hide big secrets, but they cannot contain them forever.' She would know," I replied softly. Sarah started the engine. "Where to first, then? Grand Canyon? New Orleans? We have no schedule, no obligations." For the first time in months, I felt a genuine smile form. "Let's just drive and see where the road takes us." As we pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the house where I'd once been told I was unwanted, thrown away, not part of the family, I realized that family isn't defined by blood or inheritance or shared history alone. Sometimes it's forged in the crucible of shared pain, in the choice to face truth together rather than perpetuate comfortable lies apart. Elena had waited 27 years for her revenge, patience born of hatred. My sister and I were learning a different kind of patience, the kind needed for healing, for rebuilding, for finding our way forward without the false security of wealth built on corruption or the false comfort of family myths. Last week, a letter arrived from Maria Gutierrez with photographs of the community center's opening celebration. Among them was an image of a plaque dedicating the library section to my mother's memory. Because in the end, Maria had written, she tried to make things right. Perhaps that's all any of us can do. The maid who was meant to be the instrument of our family's destruction had instead, through her sister, become part of its redemption. The fortune my father had given to Elena's sister out of guilt had transformed into something neither family could have imagined when they first became entangled decades ago. Sarah reached across the console to squeeze my hand as the house disappeared from the rearview mirror. "Do you think we'll ever understand all of it?" she asked. "The whole truth about Mom and Dad and Elena?" "No," I answered honestly. "Some secrets stay buried, but maybe that's okay. We know enough to choose a different path." The road stretched before us, uncertain but full of possibility. Not the neat, satisfying revenge Elena had planned for decades, nor the tidy inheritance my father had tried to control from beyond the grave. Something messier, more authentic, and ultimately more valuable. The chance to write our own story, free from the shadows of the past. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today.